kind of work that into any talk yet. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm assuming all the people that are coming have already come. I'm just going to start with a bit of self-publicity, a quick video. Has anybody here heard of JWorks? JWorks conferences. JWorks Belgium is next month, and so is JWorks Ukraine. I spoke at those conferences last year, and they've asked me to speak again, and JWorks Ukraine asked me to make a video, which I will now share with you. Hopefully the sound will work. Thank you very much. Here's our film crew today. These are my daughters, that's Felicity with the berries, and that's Clementine standing there. Right, there you go, Clementine, you can draw the rest of this now. So, last year, I spoke about how Agile is a dirty word. When I was in Ukraine, in Kiev, in November, I also spoke about Agile is a dirty word. And here's a picture of me in Ukraine. This is one of their daily life. Who's sitting right there? This is David Smith, whose name I completely forgot. This guy here, none of us know who he is. We've got absolutely no idea. Well, and here's me on the stage talking about quantum computing. Unfortunately, at the top of it comes to Agile as a dirty word, so I've got no evidence about having happened in Ukraine, but it did. Well, a lot happens in a year. There's my old title slide, there's my old employer at ThoughtWorks. I no longer work for ThoughtWorks. I now work for JWorks. Now, that means that my title slide has to change, get rid of all the branding. There it is. But there's one thing that hasn't changed in the last year, and that is that Agile is still a dirty word. So, if you want to see that presentation, Agile is still a dirty word, which is the official follow-up from this one. It will be in Antwerp next month and in Kiev about the same time. Obviously not exactly the same time, because I'm not doing a common talk, so I can't be in two places at once. So, what about Agile as a dirty word? Well, firstly, I'm going to prove that Agile works on the job by just pointing out that I completely forgot to plug my clicker thing in and scrambling for it in my bag. So, that's me. I'm James. I used to work for ThoughtWorks, as was mentioned in that video. I now work for JWorks, which is cool. I've worked in software all my life. Increasingly, I realised that the problems that we encounter have nothing to do with software, they're to do with people. And that's kind of what I'm talking about now. Interesting fact about me, I suffer from a condition called prosopagnosia, which means that I don't recognise faces. You all look exactly the same to me in this room, believe me. It's weird. Well, other people say it's weird. It's just normal to me. So, today, I've been at this conference. There's that man again, David Birnie, just to prove that I do go to other people's talks. I took that photo. What did I do after that? Well, I kind of do what I do in most places in Europe. I went running. The interesting thing about running in Belgium, which I've never done before actually, is that I noticed that it's the most boring flat terrain in the world. I noticed there's a lot of very straight roads. Do you even have a word for hill? Because I certainly didn't see any. That was the most interesting picture I could find. I mean, admittedly, I haven't been to Brussels yet. Normally I would show nice pictures of tourist activity. I'm doing that this weekend. I've never been to Brussels before. I heard it's a very nice place. And there's just to prove that I sometimes don't wear branded t-shirts, there I am. And then, of course, before the talk, that man popped up again. He insisted that I go in the bar with him. So, oh God, my clicker isn't working. I think I need it to be on the, I think one of the USB things is broken in this crap thing with these new modern Macs. Oh God, maybe it doesn't work, who cares? Alright, so what am I going to talk about today? Agile. I think we have seen that Agile has become a dirty word. In a lot of our daily work, people think that it doesn't work, they do that, so I'm going to talk a bit about why did it become a dirty word, and then moving on forward from it. So, first of all, how did Agile become a dirty word? Answers on a postcard, please. Oops, let's start with a pub quiz. Do people do pub quizzes that aren't in the UK? Does that happen everywhere? I always wonder this. So in the UK, there's a thing called a pub quiz. You get drunk and do a quiz, and that's what's going on in that picture. So here's a quiz. Does anybody know what country that is? I can't remember myself. I think it's Laos. That one? Anybody?
Egypt. Nee, wacht.
It's Algeria.
Nee, Marokko. Het is Libië, no?
That one, anybody? Congo, well played. That one? It's a very new country. Timor-Leste, East Timor. That one is Ethiopia. That's an easy one. The dark green one, not the light green one, but Wikipedia didn't have a picture of the dark green one at the time.
North Korea.
North Korea, well played. That one? Sri Lanka, well done. And that one? Nepal. What do those countries all have in common?
Dark green.
Apart from being dark green in my amateurish pictures. Anybody else want to offer an answer? Go on, David. I know you've seen the presentation before.
Republics. They have republic in the name.
Correct, but more importantly, they are the only 8 countries in the world that have the word democratic in their name. Do you think those countries are democratic? What does anybody want to offer a chance suggestion on that? Well, there is fortunately something called the Democracy Index, which you can go and look up on Wikipedia. Let's see how highly these countries score on it. What does that tell us about what countries? And I remember thinking this for the first time when I was a kid, when we had the German Democratic Republic and all these countries in Eastern Europe that wanted to tell the world we're democratic. And you know what? We know they weren't. You know? So why am I saying this? Well, we'll come on to that in a moment, but just for reference, does anybody want to guess what number 1 in the world is, the most democratic country in the world? Someone said Sweden. I didn't hear anybody, I apologise if anybody said Norway, which is number 1. Anybody want to hazard a guess where the UK comes? And by the way, my data is before Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. So this may change this year. So bear that in mind. Anybody want to guess? UK is number 14, so quite high up. Now, what about Belgium? Where do you think Belgium? Are there any Belgians in the room? I'm not one. Yeah. Parlez-vous français? Chaque fois je viens en Belgique, je sais parler français, mais les Belges mieux parlent anglais que moi. Donc, je parle anglais en France. Yes, as I described by my crap French then. Come on, where's Belgium, do you reckon? Higher or lower than the UK? Higher or lower?
35 or something.
31. I was quite shocked about that when I first looked at it. But hey, there you go. So why am I saying this? Well, it's amazing that the countries in the world that claim to be democratic, frankly, aren't. And what I've found as a consultant over the last few years is often we start an engagement, I go there and people say to me, yeah, we're doing Agile. Oh no, God. The very fact you have to claim that you think you're doing it is a red flag, right? You're bragging about something. Why do you feel the need to brag? Is it to convince yourself? Is it to convince your people? Is it to convince anybody that wants to hire somebody to work from you? But you know what? You're probably talking bullshit. And when this was a ThoughtWorks presentation, I used to have a little ThoughtWorks person, but now that I've moved on from ThoughtWorks, it has to be a cat. So the cat, there you go. I genuinely heard that of a CTO of a company I worked for a couple of years ago. Yeah, I don't think Agile's the problem. So, why is Agile a dirty word? We'll come on to that, but bear in mind that, I don't know if you're a consultant, whether you work internally, whether you change jobs, there's a lot of other toxic words as well, there's some of them. They can be toxic in certain environments, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. MVP is a particularly toxic thing because it's so badly understood. Or maybe it's because it's so well understood by so many different people that have any different definitions. I don't know. But it's definitely a toxic word. Cargo cults. Anybody familiar with this term? I see this all over the place. It came from the Second World War. There were Pacific islands that were, I guess, as the Americans went there, they built landing strips. And then what happened to the landing strips was planes landed on them and they disgorged cargo, which actually gave wealth to the inhabitants of those islands. And the locals, in many cases, didn't understand what the cause and effect relationship was. So they looked at the rituals and the practice of making a landing strip and having a person there standing up and doing signals or whatever. And they thought by doing that, the planes would land and give them wealth. That's a classic cargo cult. It exists on certain Pacific islands. And you see that type of behaviour in badly run organisations. They think that by doing the things that are the rituals, they will get the results. That's classic bad agile. And we see that all over the place. It's cargo culting. People go to meetings without any clue about why they're doing it. And another big problem is that, and I see this time and again, people confuse Scrum with Agile. Scrum, yes, it's a methodology for doing stuff which has become quite closely associated with Agile, but it is very definitely not Agile. If you look at what Agile means, it isn't Scrum. Scrum is just a way of attempting to get the results we need from Agile. And I think that's a big problem. If you look at that, I don't know how clear it is. I searched for Scrum plus Agile in Google, I got 33 million results. That kind of says how tightly coupled they are, although when I looked at this slide later, I realised I didn't put a plus sign, so it's probably bollocks. Fake Agile is all over the place. This article here, there should be a link to it, but actually it's just a page number. It's off the ThoughtWorks website. I did have some input into that when it was written originally, but how that worked from how to the JWorks website instead. But it's a thing. It's around. Fake Agile is everywhere, and I think it's something we need to be aware of. I think we're about to get our favourite product owner person in a moment. Oh, here we go. What does dirty look like? I don't have this interview. So what does dirty look like? If you come across all sorts of stuff in your life, I would imagine if you're scared of Agile or you've seen it badly applied, you've seen a lot of this stuff. I love this slide. I did this for a showcase in a client where I said, I think this is what's going on. You have, someone does, oh God, I hate it when that happens. Excuse me a moment. Just make that slightly bigger. Oh no, it's the one underneath, isn't it? Make that a bit bigger. There you go. Move that one back on top. Hit the play button. Look at that. Nobody ever knows that didn't look bad. That's continuous improvement. Somebody at some point did a bad release. What happens? Someone, so a really clever person says, we need to do more testing. We need to take longer about our testing. What has happened then? Well, it takes longer to release stuff. Right? You get longer and longer cycles. What does a longer cycle mean? And I'm not being Bruce Forsyth, but nobody in this room knows who he is, that isn't me. What do longer cycles mean? Well, you release more stuff. Right? That's the inevitable consequence of a longer cycle. What does releasing more stuff means? Well, it goes wrong. It breaks. And because in recent years we've been using Agile, people blame Agile. People don't stop to think that it was their idiocy in pushing the cycles out that caused this problem. They just say, well, it must be Agile because that's what changed 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago. Well, you know what? When you were doing waterfall or when you were doing any other stuff, every release was like that. Why are you picking on Agile as the thing that caused the problems? Oh yeah, I bet that's transition to people by surprise thing. Another bad release. So that's a cycle of fear. We see that stuff everywhere in our business. When, as consultants, I tend to only see dysfunctional businesses. So I suppose my worldview is skewed. But that's the type of cycle of dysfunction that we see everywhere, and that's an example of it. By the way, this is a great tool for illustrating stuff to people. You can make these cycles of fear about many, many things, these types of cycles of dysfunction. Again, I need to talk to our designer who rebranded my slides because there used to be a link here to cycle of fear. I think it's Michael Nygaard's website. He talks about cycles of fear. What can happen with cycles of fear is you end up with risk management theatre. And this is a classic case of what dirty looks like. Everything's become so bad that people are just following checklists, which the result of which is, generally speaking, when I follow a checklist and I make sure I've done it, the result is that I'm not going to get blamed when it breaks. That's the only outcome that those checklists, in the worst cases, service. And in banks, for example, there tends to be massive groups of teams. A high percentage of the organisation's day-to-day job involves servicing checklists to make sure they don't get blamed when it goes wrong. They actually actively add no value. Here's an example of some risk management theatre. This is in Hemel Hempstead, where I live in the UK, just north of London. I was walking with my daughter into the town centre one day and I saw that. Caution, broken glass. Now, you can't really see it on the picture, but up the top there, that orange barrier up the top, is actually secured to those railings with chains. Somebody has gone to the effort of really securing it. Each barrier is secured to each other barrier, and out of shot to the left is kind of fixed in the ground. How expensive is that? Of course, look at it. There's a real danger to people by that broken glass, isn't there? What, you can't see the broken glass? I'll help you out. It's there. Oh, hang on. There it is. I look at stuff like that and say, how did that happen? And I think it happened because one day somebody cut their foot on a piece of broken glass. So somebody else said, right, if we ever see broken glass in the area again, number one, secure the area, make sure nobody treads on it. And it's being slavishly followed, and that is the result. That is risk management theatre. How much cost and expense? And by the way, those things stayed in place for at least 3 weeks. Because I walked down the town with my daughter a few times, and from the time I took that photograph, which was the first time I saw it, I last saw it 3 weeks later. I don't know, so it was at least 3 weeks. Why did the person not just pick that glass up? Right? It's a classic case of the outcome that you want being detached from the process, and the process is just not delivering the results that you want it to do. Safe is, I think, well, unsafe. It's the best example of crap fake agile around there. Does anybody in this room work with Safe? Oh, come and talk to me afterwards. There's a therapy group I run. Those 9 principles I actually quite like. I think they're good statements of intent, and I don't mind them, apart from that one. Oh, hang on. I'll forget the transitions because I can't see them. That one's rubbish, and the line, I'm a satire designer. It actually should be on the one above. It's the one above I dislike, the one that says apply cadence synchronized with cross-domain planning. That is so solving the wrong problem. If you have to synchronize and cross-domain plan, you ain't solving the right problem. What you need to do is decouple the bits of your business so that you just don't need to do that stuff. The picture on the top right, did something just happen in that? Oh yeah, the whole accreditation thing. Why do you need to accredit people against your stuff? And that thing in the top right just scares the hell out of me. So just to zoom in on that picture, it's supposed to be an agile framework. Who can seriously look at that and interpret what it means and how it is in any way agile? Come on.
It's clickable.
It's what?
It's clickable.
What's clickable?
That's his answer. You can click and have the details.
My God, well, I just took a screenshot. I'll tell you what I'll do with it. I'll say those bits are good, those bits are crap, and I'll move on. The one thing about this, the customer is way up there in the top right. It should be down here with the dev teams, right? It's just such a misunderstanding to say the customer lives on some mythical high level. Oh God. I don't know, I'm happy to have a discussion about Safe afterwards if you think it's in any way defensible. No, thank you. The least defensible part of this is these bits here. These things, they're called program increments. And I think the next transition puts some big X's on them. The idea is that every 3 or 4 sprints or something, I don't know. You all get together and talk about how you're going to do your lockstep releases and who's relying on what. I worked in a company where the program increment PI planning, they called it. It took a week, and it was coordinated between London and New York. There were 40 people in the London office taking part, and it was from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. UK time for a week. And there were a similar number of people in New York doing it and some other American location. I asked for the numbers of how many people were involved, and I did a calculation about what the cost of that planning was. And I turned around to their CTO and said, do you realise for that amount of money you could have just decoupled your systems and not needed this crap? Don't think he listened. So that's what I really think about it. I think it's command and control masquerading as agile. And I apologise to anybody that loves safe or thinks safe is great, because I think most agile so-called frameworks, fake agile, bad agile, are exactly that. They are a comfort blanket to the execs who want to tell the world we're agile, but actually they don't want to give up control. They don't want to give up their command and control drugs. Here's one. Here's our CTO again. She's saying that Kanban doesn't work. We must be a special case. Every company I work for thinks they're special. So I think that's just the way it is, right? You're no different from anybody else. I'm not sure if there's a follow-up slide. Yeah, this is the type of thing that we see. I shamelessly, by the way, stole this off somebody else's presentation in an Agile conference last year sometime. These are the things you should get from Agile. But unfortunately, you sometimes get this stuff instead. I particularly like iteratively burning money. So, this next CTO, she looks a bit like the other CTOs, doesn't she? Or perhaps this is the CEO, and maybe it's a man, who knows. She's saying that we need to do rigid budgeting. And I'm like, oh God, why? Did you not understand modern business? Why do you think you need to do rigid budgeting? Budget dysfunction, I think, is the single biggest problem we need to tackle. As a consultant, the single biggest arguments I've had are around budgeting. It's like, well, you can't do that because we've got no budget. I'm like, what do you mean we've got no budget? I'm here, I'm sitting here, I want to do that, I will fix that. There was a story that I heard when I was still at JWorks where somebody working for one of our clients, so I wasn't working on this client, they were doing a migration from something to Jira. God, wow, why would anybody do that? But hey, it was taking forever. They had assigned a stack of money to do this migration, right? Which basically meant people copying stuff by hand. So this ThoughtWorks person in the pub one night just said, this is ridiculous, and wrote a script that did it all, right? And this person, the script took like an hour of drinking and hacking basically to do it. And then they went back to the client the next day and said, we've done it, you don't need those people doing that, right? These people you've hired in to do that they're due to be here for the next 3 or 4 weeks, we can just run this script. And the client's response was, no, we can't use the script because there's no budget for it. What was the sense on that? And then I think the biggest misconception in business, if the people in this room take one thing away, is we need to change the conversation from cost to value. We need to be saying to people in our companies, if we really want to maintain competitive advantage, we need to optimize our business for returning value to our customers, our current customers and our potential future customers, instead of optimizing our business around cost control. If you can make that one mindset change, you're doing well. On the upside, the US Department of Defense, this was January 2019, published a massive paper about shit agile. And I think that's brilliant that a government agency, sadly not the UK government, is calling out crap agile. So again, there should be a link there. I apologise, I need to go through the deck. If you Google whatever you see on the screen there, that article is really cool. Have a good read of that. When you let David take a picture. This is really, really part of what bad looks like. Anybody work in a blame culture? No one's admitting to it. Don't worry, I won't blame you if you do. Anybody working in hero culture, where everybody has to make sure they get credit for stuff, that's the same as a blank culture. There's a couple of nodding heads, right? Ask yourself why people are so keen to take credit, why they're willing to stay till 9 p.m. to get something done. It's because they know that if something breaks, they will get the blame. So beware, a hero culture and a blame culture are pretty much the same thing. Okay, so let's talk about some solutions. Moving away, that's what bad looks like. That's what awful, bad agile looks like. So how do we improve on that situation? So my first piece of advice is to avoid the dirty words. When I've gone into a really dysfunctional unit as a consultant, and I can see that they don't trust Agile, they don't trust whatever, I don't use those words. I will talk about things that actually deliver the results, because one of the reasons why they think it's toxic or they don't like it is because they don't understand it, right? And that classically will mean that they don't really understand what the outcomes are that they're driving towards. So I will focus my language on stuff that isn't those dirty words. So let's talk about what Agile is. It isn't Scrum. It isn't Kanban. It's not anything to do with process. Put aside all any preconceptions you've got about what process. There are definitely some reasonable processes that support Agile, but that is not what Agile means. And it is absolutely 100% not something that any organisation can go out and buy. If any consultant comes to your organisation and says, we'll make you Agile in 6 months, that person is selling snake oil. Tell them to go and take a run and jump. So Agile is a manifesto which consists of 4 value statements and 12 principles. Simple as that. So, these are the 4 values. Do people know these? Have people read these? You know what? A lot of places I go to, people haven't even bothered to look it up. Again, there should be a link there. I think it's something like agilemanifesto.org that just describes this. It describes the meeting and it describes the 12 values. I actually like to add a 5th one to this, which I use with my clients, which is that I think we should value outcomes over processes, which is kind of like the first one, but we should talk about outcomes and we shouldn't talk about processes. That's what I like to add to it. So we avoid the dirty words. What the advice that I was given within ThoughtWorks and I'm now giving in JWorks to our consultants on how to improve the situation is do not talk about Agile. That slide on the right, that title slide, one of my colleagues at ThoughtWorks, I started at a new engagement and I'd been there a couple of weeks and she said to me, how's it going? What do you think the problems are? I'd been put there specifically because this place wasn't working. And I said to her, well, it's obvious what the problem is, they don't understand Agile. But it's as simple as that, I need to make them get it. And she said, well, why don't you do Agile 101? And I said, well, if I do that, I can't, because they'll think who the hell are you? You know, they think they're Agile, so I can't go in and tell them that they're rubbish at their job. So she came up with a title. She said, do a talk and call it, it wasn't exactly that, but that's what it morphed into. And I was like, that's brilliant. So I talk about the Agile values in that talk, but without ever mentioning the word Agile. So I get people focusing on those values and how they apply to their business. That's a great way to get the ball rolling. Because you're not using the toxic words, you're not going into any space that people feel uncomfortable in. So here's an example of a toxic word, again, and an example of the type of techniques that I use to avoid the dirty word. I've heard this from so many product owners, from so many CTOs. I know we can't do an MVP, our clients expect better. And I said, well, what do you mean? What do you think an MVP means? And they just misunderstand it. So my best example is this. I wanted to do a picture for a newsletter for, again, it's ThoughtWorks, so I should stop saying ThoughtWorks, but that's my mate Fu, who is famous for being a hacker, right? He has text on his screen that is so small that only an ant can read it. And that ant has to have binoculars. So I wanted to do that green glow thing. So there you go, that's the result. That's the picture that ended up in the newsletter. So how did we do that? Well, it was a low-tech MVP. And that's my point to everybody. That's what goes on in an MVP and a POC or whatever, a prototype. So using these type of examples gets people to understand the real stuff, right? I'm saying, hey, this is how we did this. This is what we need to do. Value stream mapping is a very powerful thing. Waste is never a dirty word, by the way. I've yet to meet a company that didn't, even if they're cost focused, they definitely understand waste. This is something we like to do. It's basically illustrate all the crap that's going on in their process. And I always say to people, at what point in this process does anything get returned to your customer? And of course the answer is right there at the end. So if you're mucking around and doing stuff because of governance where something's in a queue for 3 weeks, why? Why are you doing that? You will get no value out of it until right at the very end when it's in production. Another pub quiz. This was the day, I was at a conference, oddly, last July, and it was the day that England were playing in the World Cup semi-final against Croatia. For those that aren't English, we lost. I was very upset. This was the aftermath. I helped clear up the room. Can anybody spot the waste in this picture? Anybody need any help? My point is waste is not always obvious. The waste is this puddle here, because that's where I opened the beer and it's spilled, because the value stream was to get me drunk to forget the fact that we've just been knocked out of the World Cup. So that's where the waste in that picture is. My point being, it's not always obvious what waste is. We need to illustrate it to clients. We need to say to them, is that thing really worth it? When you start talking about outcomes, you'll find that waste just disappears. If people focus on the outcomes they're trying to get towards rather than how they get there, you'll find that the processes that are worthless will drop away. I don't know why the second, oh damn it. This is meant to be a slide that I'm doing for the new presentation. Ignore that. How do we talk to Agile and prove people it works? This is a device that I've used quite often, and I've got an example here where I talk, whenever I read a news article which sounds Agile-y to me, I was talking to David about this sort of stuff earlier, I extract it and use it, and here's an example. I had an example about cricket, but when I thought to myself, I'm not in the UK, I'm likely to be 100% of the people in the room that have even heard of cricket. So I decided to use a football example instead. This was in the Times last year, before Jose Mourinho got sacked from Man United. The dint is that final paragraph there, and if we read that, the bit in bold says, he had a revolutionary way of inviting them to help determine tactics in preparation for games, and they reviewed their performances. To me, that's an Agile parable. Right? This football coach is apparently revolutionary because he's using techniques that are all part of Agile, like continual learning and getting buy-in from everybody. Brilliant. Articles like this are everywhere. When you see them, use them, give them to your CTO, give them to your client to illustrate why Agile works. I stole this from JWorks. We try to be tech at core. This is again not mentioning the word Agile, but how to get towards Agile by dancing around the subject. And basically, you say where people are, they want to be on the right-hand side of the diagram, and then you say to them stuff like this. All the stuff on the left is bad, all the stuff on the right is good. That's where we are, and we want to move to the right. You could change this. I made this slide for a specific client. You can make it specific to your own circumstances. For example, you could say that on the bottom line. You know, on the bad side, we chuck stuff over the wall. On the good side, we have a collaborative culture and we curate our own stuff. Anybody read this book? Wow. Thank you, David. Read it. It's the single best book I've read in technology in the last 10 years. If you measure your business by those 4 key metrics, you will inevitably improve your business. Fact. Absolute fact. Don't believe me, read the book. So how do we clean up the mess? Well, demonstrate Agile with a small aim, meaning I'm flexible, I can move on, I can change. This is Leicester Forest Services in the UK. It's on the M1 motorway. I was driving, I know this service station very well because I've often stopped in it on the way back from Stag Do's. It's halfway between the north of England and where I live. I like it because there's a KFC, and actually I'm vegetarian now, so this story's a bit shit, but at the time when this story happened, I wasn't a vegetarian, and I love the KFC. And it's next door, literally, inside on that bridge, and right next to a Burger King. And the Burger King has this advert on it, always, and it really pisses me off. Because why would you advertise chicken products when you're next to a KFC, right? No one's going to buy the chicken products from Burger King when it's next to a KFC. So I'm driving down the M1 after a hard week's work, this was, looking forward to my KFC, and looking forward to mock that advert again. And what happened was this. KFC was closed for refurbishment. So, oh, Jesus. But you know what? That's fine, because, you know, second prize, I'll have a Whopper with cheese. Great. Unfortunately, have a look at this notice here. Well, you can't see it, obviously. I'll help you out. You still can't see it. So this is what it says. And it goes on. Just mocking me directly, because I'm not going to buy a Burger King bean burger. But look, they apologised. So what do? I think to myself, well, I'm not going to buy a Burger King bean burger, so I'm going to buy a chicken product. So I bought the chicken product. I sat down thinking, this is going to be shit. Started eating it, and you know what happened? It was the best chicken product I've ever eaten in my life. And what am I saying? You have to be agile. You have to understand that your strategy is going to change. Does anybody recognise that quote? There you go. Mike Tyson said that, apparently. And just to round this out, I love this. I read this quite recently. The only sustainable competitive advantage is an organisation's ability to learn faster than the competition. Take that away, please. Talk about the goal. I'm short of time, aren't I? We'll skip that bit. We'll skip that bit. Focus on the outcomes over the process, because that's what you want. You want the outcomes. Get everybody talking about that. Actually, I'm going to go back to this one. Everybody thinks they can change things all at once. It never works. Right? And for the same reason why a big software release doesn't work, a big process release won't work. Change things one at a time. Do it bit by bit by bit. Then you know what works, you know what didn't work. You understand cause and effect. So that's a big recommendation there. You need to get buy-in from everybody. How do you do that? This is my metaphor for tech debt. It's one of my favourite. I wish I'd have drawn this picture myself. I never did. I needed to get people to buy into tech debt, so we ran a workshop. The pink things and the blue stickies, one means what a tech debt thing is, like a missing test or something. The other thing means something that causes that tech debt to happen, like a piece of pressure from a product owner or something. And what we found in this workshop was that there were feedback cycles, which I thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. I didn't expect it, but that's what we got. And everybody bought into fixing it, because we had this workshop, we got everybody to buy into the solution. These are outputs from an engagement. The last thing I did for ThoughtWorks, actually, it took this, plus this, were 3 meetings spread over a 3-week period with a team talking about what they do and why they do it. We intentionally spread it out over that time frame to get their buy-in and also to change things one at a time, to get them to improve. There's us with the team. And here, that's kind of where we got to. 2 of the people in that picture are clients, 1 is a ThoughtWorks person. And finally, this was the tech lead that I was handing everything over to and saying, you know, you take over, you run the workshops now. And that was the sort of end state. He's able to take over from us and move forward. And there he is looking happy after he's just run the workshop. So getting everybody buying, getting everybody involved is a great way to move forward. And finally, when you've done all that stuff, and if you're interested in coming to my talk in Belgium or Ukraine, I'm going to focus a lot more on the solution space rather than the problem space. I love this talk because I basically get to rant about crap clients. But the talk next month is more about the whole solution part, so that's what I'm going to focus on. The end state is this. You have autonomous cross-functional teams, essentially that are in charge of their own, they own an outcome and they're empowered to deliver that outcome. That's key. Don't tell them how to do it, just tell them what you want. And trust them to do it. Get that high trust environment going. You've moved to a place where goals and values are understood and they help people get aligned and they help move forward. Again, I'll talk a bit more about this next month. You all need to come down there. wish I was making money out of commission for it. You should have a learning culture instead of a blame culture. Oh, that's a co-truance photo, lovely. Those are some of my new colleagues. When things go wrong, learn from it. Don't fire people, learn from it. That's it. You know? Anything that goes wrong is an opportunity to improve. Think of it that way. That's what learning culture means. And have blame-free retros. We talk about experiments. Experiments, I even think, and I've said this to clients, you're running an experiment on a new piece of UI, right? Don't talk about the experiment passing or failing. Talk about result A and result B. The only time an experiment fails is if you don't learn something from it. That is a failed experiment. Everything else is result 1 or result 2. You either learn something that works or you learn something that doesn't work. Move forward. Don't blame people for having experiments that don't give the desired result. And that's the second half there. Oh, that's what I just said. Shows how well I know my own slides. Do people do retros in this room? This is the retro prime directive. Do you read this at the start of your retros? 100% advise you to do so if you don't. Read that at the start of every retro. It's a massively important thing. It emphasises the point we're here to learn, not to blame. So, when agile is a dirty word, wherever you're working, firstly, understand why it's a dirty word. Look into a bit of the history of the organisation. Avoid talking about it. Avoid those dirty words. Once you've done that stage, you can start cleaning it up. And I've got techniques, as I say, we'll talk a bit more about that next month. And then once it's clean, you're in a good place. And you can start talking about it as you move forward. So in summary, oh, nice smiling. Didn't expect that. In summary, anybody know who that is? With me? Go on. Woody Zill, well played. Yeah. Good work. You're the first person that's ever recognised that. Exec summary, Agile is not a process. It is about facilitating useful outcomes. Okay? It is about the culture and the values and getting positive things happening. It's definitely about the people. And when you understand it, Agile is not a dirty word. Thank you very much.